So I know that usually when I'm sitting on the couch and you see this kind of video, you're worried because it's probably gonna be me talking about myself. And that's what this is going to be. But everything's fine, don't worry. So these past few days, my physical health has been in the shitter a little bit. You might be able to hear it from my voice, which is like not quite performing ready for a proper video, but it's ready to be used to talk to people. So I decided to have a little fireside chat with my audience, obviously without the fire, because I'm not going to set my apartment ablaze just for a video. I'm not that dedicated to the craft. And I figured it's very fitting to talk about mental health, seeing as it's my physical health that's been ailing these past few days. So if you follow the channel, you know that I do have mental health problems. I have a few mental health problems, sort of a selection out of several that you can have. And I get messages probably every week from people. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, who say that, yeah, it's great that you talk quite openly about mental health and you actually advocate for mental health. Just realized I haven't shaven in days because I've been semi-locked in my apartment. Probably should have done this before starting this. People seem to be very grateful for me just talking about these things because they feel like nobody really understands what they're going through. And it's a very scary idea to be completely alone in this thing that is happening to you that you don't understand. Because mental health, much like many conditions in physical health, can be extremely scary. And I have discovered that it's a lot easier for me to talk about these things for myself than it is for most other people to openly discuss their mental health problems. And that is even though I have this like huge audience of people that I don't actually know that's going to be hearing about all my sorrows. Mental health isn't generally an acceptable thing to talk about. And I personally am very privileged with my social circle, and that I actually can talk to my friends about these things, and they have their own problems, and we understand each other, and there is a certain mutual respect. So just, for the sake of transparency, I'm going to list all the things that I have wrong with me that I know about, because that's one of the sometimes you don't know about some of the things that are wrong with you. That's one of the cool things about mental health. It's also true about some physical health things, though rarely that's going to be like, oh, your arm's missing. So my main big thing is that I have a major depressive disorder. I just go into phases where I am just depressed. It's a depression. It just happens. For me, at least, this is how it's been explained to me by the professionals. The depression works as though it were comorbid with borderline personality disorder, which is strange because I don't have any of the symptoms for borderline personality disorder. It makes long-term planning difficult because I don't know. It's like once a week, there's like a week where I am depressed, which is actually quite a lot. But for a lot of people, usually the depression lasts for like 3 months in a row, and then there might be silence for years, or the depression could last for several years. And so because I don't know if I'm going to be depressed, but there's always a good to fair chance that I will be, it's difficult for me to like plan vacations a long time ahead, because it might just hit me like this at some point. Usually it's at some point around the middle of the month, sometimes it's in the beginning of the month. It really just changes all the time. And not all depressive phases are the same. A lot of them are milder than others, which also means that some of them are a lot worse than others. And it is usually influenced by my life situation, whether or not it gets really bad. I've identified 3 different kinds of depressive episodes that I get. First one, and like probably my favorite one in terms of how I feel, is just the lethargic depression. I love how I have a favorite type of depression. It's the kind of depression where you get up in the morning and you already feel like you've run a marathon. Just extremely simple things seem like they are immensely difficult, like they will drain you of insane amounts of energy. And doing these things will actually drain you of these insane amounts of energy. I had a cough just there. So like going to the supermarket, usually a trivial thing. I don't know, the supermarket is like 5 minutes away from me. and I go there and I buy my things and I go back. It's super easy. With like a lethargic depression, oof, that shit seems like a 50-kilometer hike to some gas station in the middle of nowhere. And you generally, not only is everything just incredibly difficult, you're also not motivated to do anything, and you don't really enjoy any of the things you do. You can't even like sit back and watch a show that you like, because you're not going to enjoy it. It's just the inability to feel joy. And just the act of making that decision is way difficult. It's just any sort of a higher executive function, especially making decisions, becomes something that is just an incredibly arduous task. Then there's the I just feel like shit depressive phase, where I will just feel bad. It's not even like a feeling bad about myself kind of deal. It's just more of a, I just don't feel good. I feel physically ill. I'll usually be able to function. It'll just, nothing will bring me particular. Although sometimes, I'll be able to watch something and laugh at it. But just in general, it'll be just to try and keep away the darkness that's just surrounding me. And then there's the worst kind of depression, which is the self-hatred depression, where I just fall into a deep spiral of just hating myself for everything. Like, we all get doubts, we all question ourselves, we all think about, what if I'm really not as incredibly cool as I seem to believe I am? But this is like just a constant barrage from all directions of what seems like truth to you, that you are the most worthless piece of shit that has ever existed ever. And this is just everything, including stuff that usually you might not even be insecure about. Like, for me, it very often hits me like, oh, fucking, you're this incredibly ugly person, you're disgusting. People that you meet just dislike you for no reason, just because that's the aura that you have, is that you're a dislikable person, which, in my actual true life experience, it's exactly the opposite. Oh, you're really like a shit writer and a shit YouTuber, your videos suck, you're not good at like performing them in the way that you have developed. Look, all these people have bought your book and like very few of them have gotten back to you to say what a great piece of literature it is, therefore it must mean that they all hated it. You have no skills, you're just a burden to all of your friends, you're not worthy of being loved and cherished. And that's just all that I think about, like from the beginning of the day to the end. And it's like people say, oh, just distract yourself. It's like, no. These are called intrusive thoughts for a reason. You can't distract yourself from them. Any attempt to distract yourself from them will just make them try to intrude more. Aside from the depression, I also have symptoms of Tourette syndrome, which are very mild. Like sometimes my arms, like this part of the arm, I'm not sure what it's called, will just jerk. Mostly on this arm, sometimes on this arm. And it's really so mild that people I know that have known me for years, like close friends. Like, for instance, a good friend of mine, I was with him somewhere the other day, and he was like, why is your arm jerking? What's wrong? Are you, like, scared or something? I'm like, no, dude, I have, like, these symptoms of Tourette syndrome. And he hadn't just noticed any of that in years. He just had no idea, which, I mean, I always forget that he's colorblind, so I suppose. I have some symptoms of OCD, which is, it's only like the one that I really have, and that one's really gotten a lot milder as I've gotten older, is that sometimes I will touch something and then I will have to touch it again with the other hand to make it fair. And like, I have that with door handles a lot. Like when I close the door behind me, I'm like, oh fuck, and then I need to touch it with this one, because otherwise it's not fair and it just irritates me to an insane degree. But it's like super manageable. It's not even something that happens to me very often. It's just very occasional. And then I just grab it with the other hand and then it's done. But I wish I was able to keep the whole place fucking a bit tidier. How about you give me that symptom in a very, very mild form? Also, and this is the scary one that people go, oh shit, holy what the fuck? Is that I have symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. This is a very, like, misunderstood mental health disease. This is how it expresses for me. I don't know if you've seen season 1 of True Detective. If you haven't, It's very good. You should watch it. And so one of the main characters, he gets these things called pseudo-hallucinations, which, they're like hallucinations, so you see like a sensory input. You might not even be seeing, it could be smelling or hearing, any kind of sensory information that isn't really there. That's a hallucination. And a pseudo-hallucination is when you have that perception, but you are aware of the fact that it's not there. And in True Detective, they just really had it in there because they wanted to have an excuse to put in great visuals, which they succeeded in. It's a visually stunning show. And so what people with paranoid schizophrenia get is primarily its psychosis, which is not like a sensory information, but it's like a belief that you have that isn't true, that you get from somewhere. So like, for instance, one that's pretty much the most common is that like you're being watched, like the government is watching you, aliens are watching you. It's just a feeling that you get. And it's not really something that you can base on any evidence, it's just something that you know. You know that it is true. And so what I have are pseudo-psychoses, which is I have these kinds of, especially the idea of being watched, like not even by the government, but just the idea that people that I know are seeing me right now in the privacy of my own home, whatever I'm doing. It could be like I'm cooking something, and then I actually might enjoy it. But the difference is that I know that it's not true. Like, I am, throughout the whole psychotic episode, aware that it's not actually real. And it's like this whole being watched thing is something that happens very frequently. There's like more intense psychotic episodes where it's like a lot weirder shit, like vampires are trying to break into my home and shit. But it doesn't really affect my life that much because I know it's not actually true. It's like a forced suspension of disbelief. When you're watching like a film or reading a book, you know that it's not really true, but you are still in the thing, and it can actually affect you. And also, many people with paranoid schizophrenia do hear voices. I don't. For me, it's more like certain ideas being implanted by what I have chosen to refer to as the demon, but I write it with an A and an E, except for just an E, because I am fancy. And that's mostly like ideas. He also appears in depression. It's like ideas of self-loathing and stuff. And really that's mostly me trying to give that thing a face so I have something to sort of, I suppose, fight when these bad things happen to me mentally. But again, this all sounds a lot crazier than it actually is. I'm really all right most of the time. I just feel weird sometimes. And you may have noticed that aside from the depression, I said I have symptoms of these things. And that's really important because for something, this also has been explained to me this way, for something to be an actual diagnosable disorder, you may have symptoms of it, but it needs to affect your life negatively in a severe way, or at least a severe enough way for it to actually be classified as a medical condition. So it's like you might be short and it might be difficult for you to reach the top shelves, but you don't necessarily get diagnosed with being extremely short because of it. Aside from the depression, which I actually have the MDD diagnosis because that actually does negatively affect my life in a fairly severe way from time to time. The other things are just also there. I would argue that some of them even I benefit from, because many of the coolest ideas that I get comes from the schizophrenia. And aside from that, I always have a lot of anxiety, and it's born out of a deep insecurity that I have, among other things. It's like people that I know and people that I talk to, even people that I've known for years, they don't assume usually that I am in some way insecure about anything. Many of them are actually surprised to hear, wait, you have deep insecurities? And I'm like, yeah, motherfucker, I'm human too. And most of the time I'm not really super insecure, and there's a lot of things that I'm just not insecure about at all. But I think the main source of the anxiety is this fear for my own not physical safety, not in the sense that someone's trying to murder me, just being in a secure place in my life where I don't have to constantly worry about just everything falling apart. And a lot of that is tied to YouTube. It's not a very stable career choice. It's basically one of the few career choices that I have, with my inabilities to do certain things that normal people just can't do, and my ability to do things that normal people can't do. But I think it's a bit more difficult for me than it is for most, because I've had a pretty shit life, And I think there was 2 years of my childhood that it was just childhood, and there wasn't just something dangerous looming over me at all times where I woke up every morning thinking, oh, this could just completely change everything in my life forever for the worse. And most of those things always eventually came to pass, and then I thought, oh, I am adjusted to this new situation now, and then something new was there that could also have destroyed that, and then it usually did. So you might say I'm a bit traumatized from that. I think that this is like the whole fear of everything falling apart is common for like a lot of people, especially millennials, because it's very difficult for us to like achieve financial stability, to get to a place in our lives where we don't have to worry about adulting. And I think most people deal with it a lot better than I do. And I'm very impressed that people can handle that kind of shit, because I mean, I of course I do handle it a lot because I am exposed to a lot of it. But sometimes I do wonder how much longer I can take it, and usually it's a bit longer. And it makes it like difficult to count your blessings and see the good things in your life sometimes. It's like my Patreon has been at a great point. It's been slowly shrinking over the past few months, and I'm still at a great place. I am still punching way above my weight because I have such an amazing community, but just the fact that it is shrinking a little bit makes me think, oh, and like tomorrow is going to be the day where just everyone decides to cancel their patronage. And because I am on this razor thin edge, I mean, it would suffice if like 2 people did. And then I would be at a point where I couldn't afford to live as well anymore as I am on the poverty line. But even that doesn't really account for the fact that I am in a very privileged position for that. I get to do this thing that I enjoy, and people just give me money for it. But I think this is mostly YouTube's fault. It's a difficult thing to get into because you always need to maintain a certain level of growth to maintain the level of what you have. Because there's always going to be people who just eventually lose interest. I lose interest in things that I've been doing for a long time. It's just something that happens. And again, I think one of the best communities of like anyone. And I know this sounds like weird and cheesy and everybody says it, but like picture this. There's channels that have like 10, 20, 30 times as many subscribers as I do, who have maybe a third of the Patreon bucks. That is insane. And so I feel very lucky and I feel very privileged to be able to have these kinds of people in my life. And that's really what it boils down to, is the people that you have in your life when you have any level of mental health problems. And we all do have some level of mental health problems, just like we all do have some level of physical health problems. Those are the things that can help us through that shit. It's not so much about like overcoming the problems that we have, but to learn to live with them. And very often for that, we need our friends and we need the people that we can talk to. There's a lot of people who have it way worse than I do. I'm actually kind of okay with my mental health shit. And I do seek to help them because it's something that I enjoy, but it's very important for me, and probably for you also, to not lose sight of the fact that just because other people have worse issues than you do, that doesn't make your issues invalid. They are still real, actual issues that you need to deal with. And it's okay to feel bad about them. And this is also something that I found out about myself, is that I just love helping people. I love helping people with their problems, just being nice to people. Though I do so sometimes to like an extent that it hurts me. And that's, I don't think, very healthy. But it falls into like some of the things that I've been finding out about myself recently, because especially if you're like honest and self-reflective about your mental health, you also start to learn about a lot of the positive qualities you have. And for me, I am actually a very highly empathetic person. And I'm sometimes empathetic to the point that it's like scary for people, because I mean, imagine you know someone and they know how you feel before you are quite certain how it is that you feel. That shit is scary. And I don't want to be the one to put people in that kind of position where they don't feel like they're in charge of their own emotions, right? Where they feel like they don't know themselves as much as some person who is not living inside of their head. And also I found out that I just want to be nice to people. I just want to be kind to the strangers that I meet. Although not all of the time. I do believe that sometimes it's warranted to just be a dick. It's like, I don't need to be nice to people who are assholes. I don't need to do that. So if you've been considering that maybe you have some mental health problems, which again, you probably do. Everyone has them to some extent, much like everyone has some minor physical ailment. Like the brain is the most complex organ in the whole body. It would be absurd to assume that there couldn't be something wrong with it. And I'm in the great position of like my problems being comparatively mild and not so bad that they actually impede me from achieving just about anything in my life. It's like the comparison of you have a guy with a mildly displaced hip versus you have basically Ricky Berwick. Which, no disrespect to my man Ricky, but that's the difference between me and someone who's actually properly mentally ill who lives in like an institution. And I feel like because I am in this position that I am in, I have a bit of a responsibility to talk about these things as openly as I can, to maybe try to normalize the discussion about them. To go out there and say, hey, I'm a human being and I have these problems. And it's okay that you have these problems too, because you probably have like some of them. And we all have our quirks, and it's fine not being perfect. Because one of the things that really makes these mental health problems worse for a lot of people is that they can't really talk to anyone about it. And most of the time, a lot of people feel this way, even people who might know each other, but they won't talk to each other about it because they're so ashamed of there being like something wrong with their head, and they think that they will just be judged for it. And there are a lot of people who will judge them for it. And the thing is, I can understand those people. Sometimes when I'm not in a depressive phase, I just cannot empathize with myself when I have depression, because I just don't understand why I don't just do something that I like and like cheer myself up. Which is absurd, being someone that knows that that just isn't possible, because the problem is you can't feel joy. Being able to talk to friends in situations that were very dark, or just the knowledge of that I could talk to someone, be it a friend or even like just a hotline for that kind of shit, because no matter where you are in the world, probably one of those exists. That has saved me from attempting suicide like a couple of times. And it's true that there are people who go like just full on Munchausen's with mental health, because it's a lot easier to fake mental health symptoms than it is to fake not having a leg. You have to be a proper magician for that shit. And I found out that even in the times where I thought I was alone, it turned out I wasn't really, because there's always someone out there, like no matter where I was, even long before I became this person who always could, if they wanted to, have someone to talk to. But places in my life where I thought that I had no friends, because I knew no one who was even anything remotely like me. There were people that I was able to talk to. There were people where I didn't expect it. I was just desperate and I didn't want to hurt myself to a degree. Like I was scared that I would, and I just started talking to people, and they understood and they were like, yeah, I have these problems too. And just by me like talking to them about this stuff in the way where it affects me, they did gain a sort of understanding that it is okay to have these sorts of problems, which is weird that I could help someone's own like emotional development by basically whining to them. Like I've been waiting for my life to sort of become alright for a while now, probably really my entire life. And even though I still have a lot of anxiety, it's gotten a lot, like my life has just objectively gotten a lot better. And I really enjoy that that's the case. There's not really a point to all of this video. I just wanted to talk about these things to maybe try and do my part to normalize conversation about mental health. Hey, if you're someone who has their own mental problems, Maybe talk about your mental problems on the internet. Who knows? I know that it's very difficult to talk about these things, so if you just want to like appreciate that other people are doing it while not giving yourself like the vulnerability of talking about these things in public, I personally think that's perfectly fine. Like, I get that that is something that's insanely scary, and just because something is scary doesn't mean we have to do it. But then me doing this might just be my messiah complex, because I want to like help everyone and cure everyone of their ailments. I'm like Jesus if he wasn't gay. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I may not have said this before, I'm pretty sure that I did, but this isn't the regular video. The regular video is going to be coming out tomorrow. Hopefully, I think my voice will be back by then. And even if it isn't, there will be 2 videos this week. I promise you that. And yeah, I mean, I hope this video did something for you. It might not have done anything for you, but I hope it did. And see you around, cunts.